My name is Asher Knight, a man whose entire existence became an unfortunate footnote in the life of Celeste Lancaster. A year and a half ago, I found myself entangled in a marriage that was never supposed to mean anything. A contract signed in ink, not love. It was all for her grandfather, Gerald Lancaster, a ruthless business tycoon who wanted to see his granddaughter married before he died. And since she was already engaged to me from childhood, I became the lucky candidate, Celeste. And I agreed from the beginning one year. Then we divorced, and she'd go back to the man she truly loved, Ashton Vance. That was the plan. Simple, clean, no strings attached. Except, Ashton didn't take it so well. The moment he found out Celeste had married me, he vanished overseas, cutting off all contact. Celeste, who always carried herself with this untouchable grace, hid it well, but I knew she was shaken. She never wanted this marriage, and neither did I. So I played my role, the unwanted husband, the extra in her. Grand love story. I didn't try to win her over. I didn't treat her like a wife. We barely spoke beyond what was necessary. I went about my life enjoying the benefits of being Mr. Lancaster endless wealth, an elite reputation, and more money than I could ever need. But deep down, I resented her. I resented the cold, distant way she treated me. Like I was an obstacle, a temporary inconvenience. I resented that I was nothing more than a placeholder until Ashton returned. So I never hesitated to criticize her in my head. At least I'd think about how robotic she was, how lifeless, how she lacked warmth, passion, or anything remotely human. And all this time, I never knew she was reading my thoughts, every insult, every bitter remark. Every time I rolled my eyes at her behind her back, she heard it all, and yet she never said a word. Maybe she wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. Or maybe she enjoyed the knowledge that she had the upper hand, that she could listen to my mind unravel while I foolishly thought I was keeping my resentment hidden. Either way, our relationship remained unchanged, cold, distant, Tarnsaciona. Everything shifted the moment Ashton came back. Celeste, who had been nothing but a statue beside me, suddenly came alive. She smiled more in one day than she had in the past year. She laughed. She glowed, and I hated it, not because I had feelings for her, because I didn't. That would be ridiculous. But because I knew exactly what would happen next. She would run straight back to Ashton. She would get her happily ever after. And I would be discarded like I never existed. But before she could make her move, before she could officially rid herself of me, fate intervened. The accident. The moment our car crashed. Something shifted. For the first time, Celeste's cold facade cracked. I saw something in her eyes, something raw, something real. She wasn't calling out for Ashton. She was calling out for me, and suddenly, I realized I didn't understand my wife at all. When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I saw was Celeste sitting beside me. She wasn't her usual, composed, untouchable self. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes tired, and for the first time she looked worried. Asher, she breathed, exhaling in relief as soon as I opened my eyes. I blinked, my head throbbing from the accident. My body ached in places I didn't even know could hurt. But the real pain, the one that cut deeper, was the look on her face, like she actually cared, and I knew that was a lie. "Where's Ashton?" I rasped, ignoring the dryness in my throat. "Shouldn't you be with him?" Celeste's lips parted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. But she quickly schooled her expression, returning to her usual cold detachment. "He's fine," she said simply. That was all. No elaboration, no explanation. Just a vague, clipped answer that told me nothing. I stared at her, feeling a sudden rush of frustration. Why was she even here? The Celeste I knew, the one who barely tolerated me, would have left as soon as she knew I was stable. She wouldn't be sitting here, watching over me like some concerned wife. And then the nurse walked in. "Mrs. Lancaster, your husband is stable now. The doctor will be here soon." Mrs. Lancaster. The words felt mocking, a title that didn't mean a damn thing. And yet, Celeste didn't correct her. Not even a flicker of protest. Something about that made my stomach twist. But I pushed it aside. I had bigger things to think about, like the fact that I should be celebrating right now. Because if this accident taught me anything, it was that I had a golden opportunity. Right in front of me, Celeste was worth billions. Her company made over $4 billion a year. And since we were still legally married, a chunk of that was considered marital property, which meant that if I played my cards right, I could walk away from this insane marriage with at least $2 billion. $2 billion. That was more than enough to set me up for life. I could disappear. Buy a massive estate in the countryside. Never work a day again. Hell, I could even have a college girl on a monthly allowance one who actually wanted me around. Unlike my current wife. The thought made my lips curl into a smirk. And that's when I felt it, a shift in the air. Like something was off. I turned my head. And Celeste was staring at me. Not just staring, glaring. Like she had just read my thoughts. Like she knew exactly what I was thinking. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to shrug it off. She couldn't read minds. That was ridiculous. So I cleared my throat and tried to act casual. Well, I said, stretching as much as my injured body would allow. Since I'm alive and kicking, I guess we can speed things up. She raised an eyebrow. Speed what up? I grinned. The divorce. Let's just get it over with. No need to drag it out any longer. For a second, Celeste didn't react. Then she smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, deliberate, almost mocking. Oh, Asher, she said sweetly. I think you're misunderstanding something. My grin faltered. What? She leaned in slightly, her fingers tracing the edge of my hospital bed. I'm not divorcing you. Silence. A cold, suffocating silence that made my pulse spike. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. What? Celeste, don't play games. You've been waiting for this moment for over a year. She tilted her head. Have I? Her tone was so calm, so unbothered that it made me uneasy. I sat up straighter despite the pain. What's going on? Celeste tapped a manicured nail against the hospital tray beside my bed, her eyes gleaming with something dangerous. Did you really think? I didn't know. She murmured. My throat went dry. No, what? She smiled. That smile sent chills down my spine. Ashton, she said. My beloved first love. The man I waited for. The man I would have thrown away everything for. I swallowed suddenly, feeling like I was standing on unstable ground. What about him? I asked carefully. Celeste's fingers stopped tapping. Her eyes darkened. He's a liar. The words hit me like a freight train. What? She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ashton isn't the man I thought he was. My heart pounded. This wasn't part of the plan. Celeste was supposed to be running back into Ashton's arms, not. Whatever this was, I needed. To fix this, I don't know what happened, but this doesn't change anything. We made a deal, Celeste. 1 year. Then we go our separate ways. Her expression didn't change. Yes, we did, she said. But I've changed my mind. Every muscle in my body tensed. You can't just change the deal, I snapped. That's not how this works. Celeste let out a soft tilting her head as if considering something. Then she leaned in, so close that her breath ghosted against my cheek. Are you sure? She whispered. And just like that, I knew I was in trouble. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Celeste was supposed to be celebrating Ashton's return. She was supposed to be demanding a divorce, not looking at me like I was suddenly part of her plans. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Celeste, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice even. This isn't funny. You can't just... She cut me off with a quiet laugh. I'm not joking, Asher. Her tone sent a chill through me. She meant it. She had no intention of letting me go. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. My body still ached from the accident, my mind still foggy. But one thing was clear: Celeste Lancaster had changed, and I had no idea why. Swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it. Maybe this was some kind of power play. Maybe she found out I was looking forward to the divorce and just wanted to punish me, or maybe she knew. The thought nearly made my stomach drop. I had never taken Celeste seriously before. Sure, she was brilliant when it came to business, but emotionally, she was just a cold, unfeeling woman trapped in her own world. At least that's what I had told myself, but now I wasn't so sure. She was looking at me differently, as if she could see through every little lie, every mask I'd ever worn. Forced to smirk, leaning back against the pillows. So what? You suddenly love me now? Her expression didn't change. No. My smirk faded. That should have been a relief. It should have reassured me that I wasn't dealing with something more dangerous. But somehow her calm honesty was worse, because if she didn't love me, then why was she keeping me here? Why was she choosing me over Ashton? I crossed my arms, my frustration growing. Then what do you want from me, Celeste? She studied me for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the hospital bed. I realized something, she said softly. Something I should have known a long time ago. I raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Celeste tilted her head, her sharp gaze pinning me in place. You're not as simple as you pretend to be, Asher. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell did she mean by that? I kept my face neutral, but my pulse was racing. What are you talking about? She smiled. Do you think I didn't notice? Notice what? I forced out. Her fingers stopped moving. Her expression turned unreadable. The way you've been playing dumb. The way you let everyone underestimate you. The way you pretend you don't care about anything when in reality you're always thinking, always calculating. A heavy silence stretched between us. She was too close to the truth. I had spent years perfecting this act. The laid-back, easygoing husband who had no ambition, no real drive. The kind of man people overlooked, because that's what made it easier to survive. That's what made it easier to leave. But now, Celeste was seeing through it. And that was dangerous. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. You give me too much credit, Celeste. I'm just a guy who got lucky enough to marry into money. That's all. Her gaze didn't waver. Are you? The weight of her stare was unbearable. I needed to get out of here. Fast. I pushed back the blankets and tried to stand, but my body betrayed me. A sharp pain shot through my ribs, making me stumble. Celeste moved instantly, catching my arm before I could fall. Her grip was warm, steady. I hated that it felt comforting. I'm fine, I muttered, yanking my arm away. She didn't stop me. She just watched, an amused glint in her eyes. You always do that, she murmured. Do what? Push people away when you're scared. I stiffened. I'm not scared. Her smile was slight, knowing. Ashton used to say that too. I froze. There it was. The mention of him. Finally. I narrowed my eyes. Speaking of Ashton, I said, my voice laced with irritation. Shouldn't you be running back into his arms by now? That was the plan, wasn't it? Celeste leaned against the edge of the bed, arms crossed. That was the plan, she admitted. Until I found out what he did. My chest tightened. What he did? Her fingers traced the hem of her sleeve, as if debating something. Then she met my gaze, her expression unreadable. He went to see my grandfather, she said. Finally. My stomach dropped. I didn't like where this was going. He tried to convince him to change the will before he died. She continued. Tried to manipulate him into cutting me off from the family fortune. My breath caught in my throat. What? Celeste's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Oh, and that's not even the worst part, she said softly. My blood turned cold. There was more? She leaned in, lowering her voice. He was with him the night he had his stroke. I stilled. What? She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I don't know what happened exactly, but I do know one thing: Ashton wasn't innocent. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, because this changed everything. Celeste hadn't chosen me because she suddenly cared. She had chosen me because she'd been betrayed, because the man she thought she loved had been lying to her, and now she was looking at me differently. Like I was no longer the disposable husband she could throw away. Like I was something else, something more dangerous, something she wanted to keep. And for the first time since this whole marriage began, I was terrified of my wife. I should have felt relieved Ashton was out of the picture. The man Celeste had spent a lifetime waiting for turned out to be a fraud, a snake who had tried to manipulate her grandfather's will and might have even caused his death. I should have been happy. This was my perfect exit, but instead a cold dread settled in my stomach, because if Ashton wasn't her future anymore, then what did that make me? I was supposed to be temporary, a placeholder, a footnote in her life story, but now Celeste was looking at me differently, like I was permanent, like she wasn't going to let me go. And for the first time since I married her, I felt something I never expected to feel. Trapped. I exhaled slowly, forcing a smirk. Well, that's tough luck for you, isn't it? Guess your Prince Charming turned out to be a fraud. Celeste didn't react the way I expected. She didn't get angry. She didn't argue. Instead, she just watched me with that look, like she knew something I didn't. I hated that look. I shoved my hands into my pockets, suddenly feeling restless. Look, I get it. You're pissed. Your whole plan fell apart. But that's not my problem. We had a deal, Celeste. 1 year and then we walk away. She tilted her head. Do you really want that? I scoffed. Are you serious? I've been waiting for this. The second you sign those papers, I walk away with my $2 billion and you never have to. Deal with me again. Silence. Then Celeste's lips curled into a smirk. I knew it, she murmured. I frowned. Knew what? That's all you care about, isn't it? I crossed my arms. What the hell are you talking about? Her smirk widened, but there was no warmth in it. Only something cold and sharp. I wasn't sure before, she said, standing up from the chair beside my bed. She walked toward the window, her silhouette outlined against the city lights. But now I know for certain. A heavy pause, then she turned to face me. You don't actually want a divorce. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I let out a laugh. A forced one. Oh, that's rich. You think I want to stay married to you? After everything? She took a slow step forward. Yes. Her certainty made my blood run cold. You're crazy, I muttered. Am I? She mused. Or am I the only one finally seeing the truth? Her voice was too steady, too calm, like she knew something. I didn't. A flicker of unease curled in my chest. I forced myself to hold my ground. You're talking nonsense, Celeste. I want the divorce. I want my payout. End of story. She exhaled, shaking her head. You were never planning to leave, were you? I stiffened. What? Her eyes locked onto mine, unreadable. You knew, didn't you? She murmured. I felt my pulse spike. Knew what? Her voice was quiet but piercing. That Ashton had something to do with my grandfather's death. The room froze. My breath stalled in my lungs. I felt the ground shift. Beneath me. You're insane, I said quickly, too quickly. Where the hell did you get that idea? But Celeste wasn't backing down. She took another slow step forward, her piercing gaze pinning me in place. You were always too calm about our marriage, she said softly. Like you knew it would fall apart exactly the way you wanted it. A sharp silence. Then, like you knew Ashton would ruin everything for himself. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. She couldn't possibly. She didn't have proof. I forced a casual shrug. That's a hell of a conspiracy theory, Celeste. Next, you're gonna say I planned my own car accident. Her eyes darkened. No, she said simply. But I think you knew more than you ever let on. I saw it hard. This wasn't good. This wasn't good at all. Celeste had always been dangerous in her own way, cold, calculated, unreadable. But for the first time, she was looking at me like an opponent. Like she had finally caught up to me. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I needed to fix this. I needed to get out of here, get that divorce finalized, take my money, and disappear. But before I could say anything, she pulled something from her pocket, a phone, and then she pressed play. A voice filled the room low. Familiar, my voice. It doesn't matter whether they drink it or not as long as the two of them are alone in here, and emotions get the better of them, something will happen. I'll record a video and use it to file for divorce. A few billion? No problem. tilde. My blood turned to ice. She recorded me. I shot to my feet, ignoring the pain in my ribs. Where the hell did you get that? She didn't even flinch. Makoto had security cameras in that room, she said coolly. I had my assistant pull the footage before the police could. I couldn't breathe. This was bad. This was really bad, because now Celeste didn't just know I wanted the money. She knew I was willing to destroy her reputation to get it. She knew everything. Now she was standing in front of me, completely calm, completely in control, while I was the one spiraling. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. So what now? I growled. Celeste tilted her head, her smirk widening. Oh, Asher, she murmured, stepping closer until we were inches apart. That depends entirely on you. Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. Tell me, how far are you willing to go to get what you want? I swallowed hard, my entire world tilting off its axis. Because for the first time since I met Celeste Lancaster, I had no idea what was going to happen next. I had to think. Fast. Celeste had me in a corner. That recording was a loaded gun pointed straight in my head, and she was the one holding the trigger. If she went public with it, my entire plan would explode. The world would see me for what I really was, a gold digger, a manipulative bastard, who tried to blackmail his own wife for a multi-billion-dollar payout, and worse. Celeste knew it. She stood there, perfectly composed, watching me with an almost amused expression. She wanted me to break, to crack under the pressure. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I forced a smirk, shoving my hands into my pockets. So what now? I drawled. You going to blackmail me into staying? Her lips curled into a slow, calculated smile. Who said anything about blackmail? I narrowed my eyes. Then what the hell do you call this? She took a step closer, her presence suffocating. I call it negotiation. Negotiation? A sharp laugh escaped me. You must be joking. But she wasn't. I have something. You want, she said smoothly, waving her phone in the air. And you have something I want. I stiffened. What the hell could I possibly have that Celeste Lancaster needed? She was worth billions. She could destroy my life in a single sentence. So what the hell did she? Then it hit me. Ashton. I felt my stomach drop. You want me to take him down? Her expression didn't change. I want you to finish what you started. Silence stretched between us. This was insane. Why the hell would I do that? I snapped. What do I care about, Ashton? Celeste let out a soft hum. Because if you don't, this recording will find its way to the press. And you can kiss your little divorce settlement goodbye. I clenched my jaw. There it was. The real game. This wasn't just about keeping me in the marriage. This was revenge. Celeste wanted blood. I scoffed. You're unbelievable. She raised an eyebrow. Am I? You were ready to throw everything away for that bastard a week ago. I shot back. And now you want me to destroy him? What the hell changed? Her gaze darkened. You know exactly what changed. She murmured. She met her grandfather. She met Ashton's betrayal. She meant the realization that the love of her life was nothing but a lying, power-hungry snake. I should have walked away. Should have told her to deal with it herself. But the problem was, I was just as much in this game as she was. If I didn't play along, I lost everything. Celeste smiled, like she knew exactly what I was thinking. There's a gala tomorrow night, she said smoothly. You'll be there, of course. I frowned. Why? Her smile widened. Because that's when we'll ruin him. The moment I stepped into the ballroom, I knew this was a trap. Not for me, for Ashton. The room was packed with high society's most ruthless elite billionaires. Politicians, corporate titans. The perfect stage for public humiliation. And Ashton. He had no idea what was coming. I adjusted my cufflinks, scanning the room. Celeste was already mingling, looking breathtakingly dangerous in a black gown that hugged her figure like a second skin. She caught my gaze from across the room, her lips curving into a knowing smirk. Showtime. Ashton arrived moments later. He walked in like he owned the place, smiling, greeting people like he hadn't just been caught plotting against Celeste's family. I felt my fingers curl into fists. Not because I cared about Celeste, but because this bastard had played me, too. He thought I was just some disposable pawn. Time to remind him that I wasn't a single quotes tea. The gala progressed smoothly, drinks flowed. Laughter echoed, and Ashton had no clue the ground beneath him was about to collapse. Then Celeste stepped onto the stage. The room quieted instantly. She looked calm, poised. And then with a single sentence, she detonated the bomb. I'd like to take a moment to honor my late grandfather, Gerald Lancaster, she said. And while tonight is a celebration, it's also a night for the truth. A murmur spread through the crowd. Ashton's face barely twitched, but I saw the flicker of unease. Good. Celeste continued. Many of you knew my grandfather as a man of honor. What you don't know is that the night of his passing, someone tried to manipulate him into rewriting his will. The tension in the room sharpened. A few gasps. Some whispers. And then Celeste turned her gaze to Ashton. Every eye in the room followed. Ashton went rigid. What are you saying? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Celeste smiled a cold, merciless smile. I'm saying, she said, that the man I once trusted tried to steal everything my grandfather built. The room erupted. Gasps, shocked murmurs. Journalists scrambling to take notes. Ashton paled. Celeste, that's insane. You can't just... I can, she interrupted smoothly. And I have proof. She pulled out her phone and pressed play. A recording played over the speakers. Ashton's voice, caught on a hidden mic. Gerald is dying. If I can just convince him to change the will, Celeste will be out of the picture. She's blind when it comes to me. She never suspected a thing. The room erupted. Ashton's face turned to stone. He opened his mouth, probably to deny everything, but before he could, I stepped forward. You really are an idiot, Ashton, I said lazily. Did you think no one would find out? He turned to me, his expression twisting with rage. You, I shrugged. Surprise. It was over. Security moved in. The journalists were practically foaming at the mouth, and Ashton? He was done as he was dragged away. He locked eyes with Celeste one last time. Was I ever anything to you? He asked, voice hollow. She tilted her head. You were a lesson, she said simply. And just like that, he was gone. The room buzzed with chaos. But as I turned to Celeste, she was calm, untouched by the storm she had created. She looked at me. So, she said, still want that divorce? I exhaled, shaking my head. You're insane. She smirked. You love it. And the worst part? I did. The dust hadn't even settled when Celeste turned to me, her expression cool, calculating. Well? She asked. Still want to walk away? I let out a slow breath, raking a hand through my hair. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. From the moment we got married, I had been waiting for this day, the day I could finally leave, collect my money, and disappear. But now Now I wasn't sure if I had been playing the game, or if the game had been playing me. I glanced at Celeste. The woman who was supposed to be a cold, heartless heiress. The woman I had underestimated. The woman who, in the span of a single night, had turned my entire world upside down. She had trapped me, cornered me, outplayed me at my own game, and the worst part, I wasn't even mad about it. I smirked. What happens if I say yes to the divorce? Celeste raised an eyebrow. Then you walk away with nothing. I chuckled, shaking my head. That's what I thought. I had spent months planning my perfect escape, but in the end, I had never stood a chance. Celeste had been 2 steps ahead the whole time, and honestly, I should have known, because there was something dangerous about her. Something that made it impossible to look away. I exhaled. Fine, I muttered. I'll stay, she smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. Good, she murmured. The gala was still in chaos. Reporters were trying to chase down security for statements. The Lancaster board members were already in hush conversations, probably planning how to spin the story to the media. But Celeste? Celeste was calm, because she had won, and somehow I had lost. Or maybe I had just found something else to fight for. 2 weeks later, if someone had told me a month ago that I'd still be here, still married to Celeste Lancaster, I would have laughed in their face. But here I was, and nothing was the same. Not my marriage, not my plans, not me. I leaned against the doorway of Celeste's home office, watching as she typed away on her laptop, completely immersed in whatever power move she was making next. It had been 2 weeks since Ashton's downfall. 2 weeks since our war had shifted into something I still couldn't define. We still didn't talk about feelings because that wasn't who we were. But something had changed. There was a tension between us now, sharp, electric, like we were, both waiting for the other to make the next move. Celeste glanced up, catching me watching her. She smirked. You're staring, I shrugged. Can't help it. My wife is terrifyingly impressive. She let out a soft hum. Flattery doesn't suit you, Asher. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. Who said I was flattering? You? She raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering in her gaze. Careful, she murmured. I might start thinking you actually enjoy being here, I chuckled. That would be a problem, wouldn't it? For a moment, we just looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us had to, because we both knew this was no longer about contracts or betrayals or money. This was something else entirely. A game neither of us wanted to lose. I took a slow step closer. Celeste watched me with that same unreadable expression, the same look she had given me the night everything changed. A part of me wanted to ask her what this meant. A part of me wanted to demand an answer. But instead, I smirked. By the way, I said casually, slipping my hands into my pockets. I'm getting the master bedroom. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You heard me, I said lazily. If I'm staying, I want the good bed. She narrowed her eyes. That's my room. Not anymore, I teased. Celeste let out a mocking laugh, shaking her head. You really have no self-preservation, do you? Nope, I grinned. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about escape plans. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to outmaneuver her because this was fun. Celeste rolled her eyes, pushing back from her desk. Fine, she said, standing up. But don't blame me if you regret it. I grinned. I never regret anything. She stepped closer, her voice dropping into something dangerously soft. Are you sure? I swallowed. Damn her. I had spent so long trying to figure out how to leave and now I wasn't sure if I wanted to anymore, but Celeste knew exactly what she was doing. Because when she turned and walked past me, her hand brushed against mine. Just for a second. A deliberate taunting touch. And just like that, I knew this. War between us was far from over. It was just getting started. And God help me, I couldn't wait.